Jabroni, Jabroni, Oh, it doesn't matter, you spell jabroni.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to a new episode of Two Jabronis with a Wrestling Podcast, the second bonus snacker episode after WrestleMania Night 2. I'm joined by my incomparable tag team partner, Jeremy Loss. Jay, how you doing?
I'm still coming down after the Fun House match. That was like taking acid. That was wild.
That was
I'm still kind of like it affected my viewing experience of Drew versus Brock. So
it really
I'm
did.
Still coming down from it.
That was absolutely wild. All right, we're gonna do this a similar setup to how we did it last night after WrestleMania Night 1. We're just gonna isolate the matches that we liked the most. Frankly, we didn't like them all, and we'll talk about whether we like Night 1 or Night 2 better. So let's start at the top. I think one of the matches that we wanted to talk about from the get-go, Charlotte, Rhea Ripley, a really, really, really good match.
Yep.
I was a little bit surprised by the result. I know you were not, but I just thought the way they were setting this up was for Rhea to just be the next megastar and to kind of be taking the torch from Charlotte, because Charlotte will probably, in my head anyway, I figured she was going to win multiple championships down the road. And this would have been a great way to put Rhea over. Clearly I was wrong, and Rhea just straight up tapped out to the figure 8, but after a fantastic match.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. The match itself was awesome. They told a really good story. I thought both of them worked really well. I talked about this on our preview episode that like I just didn't feel that Charlotte was going to job to Rhea at WrestleMania. I could see her doing it at like Money in the Bank or Extreme Rules at a smaller pay-per-view, but not a WrestleMania. So for me, this sets up as Rhea chasing either Charlotte, or maybe we have Rhea move over to Raw and she chases Becky.
Wow.
That could be interesting.
That's actually a great point.
And then you have Bianca to be thrown in here. Like there's possibilities of where this can go now that are very, very interesting. Because if Rhea won, you were going to get Rhea versus probably Io. And then it became kind of dry as to what could be interesting in NXT. Now with Charlotte, you're going to get Charlotte probably against Io, because I think Io is going to win the ladder match on Wednesday. And then you have Charlotte Bianca, which would be incredible. And then you can have Rhea kind of come back into the picture for a pay-per-view or down the line, maybe at SummerSlam. So it opens up some interesting possibilities. I don't think this was a sign that they don't believe in Rhea. I think it's quite the opposite. I think they really do believe in Rhea, and I mean the match showed that she has incredible talent. I just don't think Charlotte was ready to job, and that's kind of my thought process.
Yeah, I mean, looking at it, I didn't think she was going to job necessarily. It was just they had just put the title on Rhea, right? And that short of a title run, it always feels like an asterisk on the whole thing. So that's why I just thought there was no way that they could do that to Rhea this early if they were going to be dubbing her like the next person to be. So I mean, that being said, you're right. It does open the possibilities of where she can go from here, and that is in of itself very, very exciting.
You also have to think about it that NXT has consistently lost the ratings war to AEW.
Sure.
And now you have a bona fide superstar, the greatest women's wrestler of all time, on your program defending a belt against some new, fresh challengers that she hasn't wrestled before. That's going to bring eyeballs. That's going to make NXT a little bit more of a watchable product in comparison to AEW. So I think this is a smart business decision as well.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's fair. Like, I think if AEW has any weakness, it is their women's division right now, and I think WWE sees that as well, and they're jumping on in. So I respect that move, and I do think that they can milk another Rhea Charlotte match out of this, right? Like I don't think they used everything in their repertoire, so that in of itself is again very, very exciting.
And then one last thing to kind of touch on this before we move on is this. I think this also opens up the possibility of more top line stars moving or at least taking part in NXT. I mean, obviously we had Finn go down a little while ago, but now you have Charlotte, who is the cream of the crop of the women's division, showing that she's willing to work with NXT talent. That's going to open the doors for more quote unquote main roster talent to start interacting with NXT, maybe going to show up on Wednesdays, having more NXT talent show up on Monday and Friday. So I think it's an interesting possibility here. I think the future is still very, very bright for Rhea. So I'm like I said, I just didn't think Charlotte was ready to job. So let's move on to the next one that we wanted to talk about, which was Christ, my brain just died. Edge versus Randy Orton.
Yeah, it died because you were thinking about it too long. Just like the match went. It went way too long.
20 minutes too long. That was
so timeout. That match legit went 36 minutes. It was
easily the longest match of the weekend.
No, not even close. Like by far, it was the longest match of the weekend. It was basically an episode of Tiger King, and a little bit less compelling, just a smidge. It by the end, I was into it. One of the things I do agree with, one of the criticisms anyway, was that there was a lot of the same thing, just in different parts of the Performance Center, right? Like that, a lot of clubbing over the back, over the chest, putting them on top of some inanimate object, and maybe figure out a way to kind of use the environment as offense. But, it didn't really mean much until they got to the top of the truck where you're like, okay, now someone can really get hurt. Like, I didn't believe anyone could really get hurt in the conference room. I don't care if there's a cage up there. That's freaking cool.
Yeah.
Might I say?
No, we need to speak on this. Whoever did the interior design for that conference room we got a problem.
They're
That's
crazy.
The weirdest design I've ever seen in
my
life.
That person is crazy because they were clearly looking at the room. They're like, oh, Triple H can be at the head of this table. When Vince comes in, he can sit on this end. And they looked up and they were like, wait a minute. I think we could put a cage up here. And, probably Triple H or Stephanie weren't working that day. And the guy was like, yeah, all right, whatever. Let's put it up there.
We're just going to put the cage.
But that, at least we got a nice little tour of the WWE Performance Center. There were aspects of that, like the gym. I've seen that plenty of times, kind of in NXT promo packages, or just kind of behind the scenes Performance Center stuff. Hadn't seen the rest of the Performance Center, so I at least was glad to get that. The match itself, I think I enjoyed it more than most people. I think, I do agree it was way too long. Like 36 minutes for that, it was just unnecessary. And they could have achieved it, like you said, in probably 16 minutes.
It reminded me of Batista Triple H from last year, where you're giving the older guys the longest time to do a no-holds-bar or last man standing match, and it's a lot of the same shit, and it's just not as, for one, it's not as stiff as it could be.
Right.
Like a lot of the other, like Becky and Shayna was a lot more hard-hitting than this match.
Right.
And that's fine because Edge is obviously in a situation where you don't want to see him taking some serious bumps, but like there were stiffer matches out there, and people working pretty snug, and then you have this match where it just wasn't all that compelling. They were doing a lot of the same shit. We did get like you said, we did get the nice tour of the Performance Center, but I just felt like they could have cut it at least by 20 minutes. I mean, if they wanted to do this whole match and then go in and just edit it out here and there later in post, like that would have been fine. It lost a lot of its luster. I thought the beginning was pretty solid. But once we started getting into like the conference rooms and in the backstage, like in the back where they were like all the supplies and all that kind of stuff, I was like, I'm a little over this. And then they did the hanging DDT on the back of the truck, and I don't like seeing that spot with Edge, considering he has neck problems.
So let's talk about that though, because like I understand your point, and like I think we went through this when Daniel Bryan first came back, right? Like any headshot that he took, any head spot, any head bump, we were like, oh, you cringe a little bit. But like, so I still got to finish it. I watched half of Edge's his 24 or the whatever documentary is airing on WWE Network. I know you watched the whole thing, and one, he talked about how the second surgery he had, I believe it was after he retired, right?
He was in 2012.
Right.
Yeah.
So he has that, and all of a sudden he talked about how the headache that he had suffered that he didn't realize he had was gone. Right. So there is that where he's just like, look, I've clearly fixed something. It was like the C4 bone. I'm probably misremembering what bones exactly were fixed or what nerves or whatever. So there is that, right? Like he wouldn't have done, and which leads me to my second point of he wouldn't be putting himself in these spots if he didn't, like, I'm sure he got it cleared by the doctors. Vince and Triple H made him get cleared by the doctors. Like there had to be many steps for this to have been done in order for it to have been done safely, because the last thing they need is like in the middle of a coronavirus era, in the middle of the coronavirus era of WWE, the last thing they need is like one of their best ever to re-injure his neck in a match like this. So
like I see what you're saying, but at the same time, like it's an unnecessary risk. Like you could, like, doing a DDT in a ring is, I mean, you can protect it a little bit more, but you're doing it in the back of a truck. Like, what if Orton slipped or something like that? Something unforeseen happened in an environment that you're not practicing in on a daily basis. You know what I mean? Like there's so much more room for error in that situation that I don't think is necessary. Even with like Edge jumping off the ladder, like I don't want to see that stuff. Like he even talked about in the 24, like his matches aren't going to be as violent or as like crazy. Like he's like, I'm never going to go through a flying or a table on fire with thumbtacks again. Like my matches are going to be telling stories with a little bit more nuance. And I felt like they were trying to do things over the edge that they really didn't need to do. I thought that there could have been a lot more nuance in this match. And it just failed on every aspect for me.
And yeah, that's fair. Like I see what you're saying. I just think ultimately, you know, he wouldn't have done anything where he felt like he'd put in too much work to that point where he would have put himself in a position to re-injure himself in a
let me ask you this: like,
way.
Do you think this match was benefited or hurt by the fact that there was no crowd and that this was at the Performance Center as opposed to Raymond James Stadium?
I think it would have been a better match with a crowd, is my gut, because I think they would have had to work differently. I think a lot of the match would have centered in the ring area, and they would have had to find some different things to do with the arena there in Tampa. I think the pirate ship would have been involved. I know Kevin Owens spoke out today that, you know, he was looking at that as a spot for him to do, and he obviously had to, you know, call an audible, and he dove off of the stage in the Performance Center. So I do think it was hurt by that, because then they were able to lean on the crutch of like, oh, let's use the back, right? Like we don't need the ring. And like Edge is one of the most talented performers ever in the history of WWE, and to kind of have him have that canvas of, you know, the ring and the arena with the crowd, I think he could, and he has such a strong connection with the crowd already, right? Like that was clear with, you know, his pop at the Royal Rumble. I think he could have drawn some interesting stuff with people there. So I do think it was hurt. Do you think the same?
Yeah,
opposite?
Yeah, I think the same. I think it would have been hugely beneficial to have the crowd there. I think also, like, I think they would have kind of reacted to fan reaction. Like if the fans were kind of groaning and noticing that it was going too long, I think they would have made the audible to just say, go home. Right. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot of benefits to having a crowd, because I mean, wrestlers talk about this all the time. Like you could tell, like if a match is going over, that like things are working, you can just tell based off the crowd. And then if the crowd is not into it, they can make the audible saying like, let's just go home. Yep. Like it's not working. Let's just get out of this. So I think having the crowd would have been hugely beneficial for them. It's kind of a shame because we were all really looking forward to this match because the build was phenomenal.
It was the best told story going into WrestleMania. Yeah. And
so that's what really disappointed me, is because I was looking forward to this match so much. So I hope maybe they continue the story. Maybe this isn't over. We'll see. But we have to get into the Firefly Fun House match, because that was, to me, that was the best thing of the entire weekend. I'm amazing.
I'm so glad that we were zooming during this match, because I don't think I would have had the full experience if I was just watching it by myself. and, like with another like mark basically, right? Like my wife was watching it. I couldn't see her face because she was like in front of me in the room, but my God, they. So what was funny was the minute Cena comes out, the first thing you said was, "Wait a minute, are they doing this in the ring?" Super pissed already.
I was legit mad.
Yeah.
Like legit mad.
And then it turned so quickly, and it turned incredibly. Like, look, I thought they knocked the Boneyard match out of the park. I don't know how you go 2 for 2 in these kind of matches because the bar had already been raised, right? Inherently after last night for this type of match. They took it to 11, as the as the Spinal Tap movie would say,
right?
Man, because there was shit in there that I couldn't have called ever. Like the NWO stuff,
the NWO reference, the ruthless aggression,
all the
reference,
callbacks to Cena were amazing. Like the callbacks to the certain points of his career that defined him.
Bray Wyatt doing the Bella dance.
Oh.
Like, come on. Like, whoever wrote that, I know Bray had a huge hand in that, but
sure.
Whoever wrote that deserves so much credit. And whoever produced it deserves a ton of credit. That was, and to be honest, Cena deserves a lot of credit because not a lot of people in his
bought in,
would buy in.
He completely bought in.
That is so huge, and I think that validates Bray Wyatt even more. Is that you have one of the greatest of all time buying into your idea and going into it 110%. Like, he did everything. He played all his characters. He jobbed. Like, that is a sign to me that not only does he believe in Bray Wyatt, but like the people in power believe in Bray Wyatt now. Like, I know that we were all really, really angry when he dropped the belt to Goldberg, but this to me made up for it because that was so innovative and so unique.
It was incredible. Yeah,
it was bonkers. And to do that on WrestleMania was just, I've never seen anything like that. I was at a loss for words. I could not stop laughing.
For those of you who follow us on Twitter or follow either of us on Twitter, check out our reaction videos. Those are not doctored. We did not plan that ahead of time. That was just us watching it. I was recording just in case we had that kind of. I literally recorded the whole show, and that was the only. I think it's like 12 seconds of us reacting to that was the only usable video, because it was the most authentic reaction that both of us had kind of at the same time. It was absolutely incredible. And on Friday it was really interesting too because Cena had actually, I don't know if you saw this, he cut like almost like a shoot promo of him saying like he's sick and tired of guys like Bray Wyatt complaining that they needed a second chance or getting a second chance. And WWE like deleted this. They cleared it from the archives. You can't even find it anymore. Someone, I guess, had screenshotted it or, screen recorded it or whatever. But, that build, like I know the Edge Orton build was phenomenal. This match actually ended up probably being the second best built leading into it, but this just delivered on another level.
The announcement for it was so dull,
right?
And we had talked about this on the pod prior. Like, the announcement was terrible, but the build actually after that was great, and that's in large part due to Bray Wyatt just being a fucking genius. Like,
he is so good, man. He is freakishly good.
We've talked about this over and over and over again, but this guy is one of the best character wrestlers I've seen in my lifetime. He is so goddamn good and gifted. It was talked about in the FCW documentary when they were talking about the promo class, and they were like, yeah, Bray Wyatt just blew us out of the water. Like,
absolutely.
He is head and shoulders above everybody else. And this shows that he has a creative mind for the business that not a lot of people have. And I really enjoyed this. I thought it was something that you wouldn't have seen from Vince allow to happen 5 years ago. And
absolutely.
Now he's realizing like, we gotta do some other things. And this, like, to be honest, this wasn't even really a match. There wasn't much time in a ring. Like, it was just storytelling, and it was interesting and bizarre, and it made me care about Bray Wyatt more than anything.
Yeah, and man, again, just blown away. I thought that they couldn't top last night because I thought last night was one of the best segments they've put together in years, and to have that back to back, again, it's just super, super impressive. I know it's a weird time, and who knows if that match is the way it is with a live crowd. Like, I don't know if they're put in that position where they have to do something like this. Maybe, probably not, honestly.
Because like, remember when they did, what match was it? When it was in San Jose and it was Bray Wyatt, Randy Orton, and they did it like pre-taped and they showed it in the arena.
Oh, the match where like the worms came out. Or like the screen, the stuff on the ring.
No, that was the WrestleMania match, but it was like a random match.
Oh yeah.
In a house.
Sure, yeah. Where was that where Orton burns it down?
Yes.
Yeah.
Like that was. I think that was a chance when they were like, "Oh, let's do a pre-taped," and that was right in the height of like the final deletion.
Sure.
So I think they were trying to like get onto that.
Yeah.
And it just didn't go over well, especially with the live crowd.
Yeah.
I don't think either one of those matches, the Boneyard or the Firefly Funhouse match, happen if this is live at Raymond James. I think they're normal matches and they're both duds.
So this is, I mean, that's crazy even to say, is that WWE benefited from that event, the live event being canceled. Because, on the surface, that should have been a nightmare. And
yeah, because, like, imagine if Taker Styles happens in real time.
It's not the same.
It's awful.
Yeah.
And imagine if this match happens. It's probably okay, but it's not even close to what they did tonight.
Sure.
So, like, I think, they definitely benefited from the fact that they probably had to think about things on the fly, and they came together with two really incredible ideas. So let's shift gears. We can talk probably about for an hour and a half about that Firefly Funhouse match, but let's shift gears to the main event, which was really, really underwhelming in my eyes, which was Drew McIntyre versus Brock Lesnar, which just ended up being both guys throwing their finishers at each other.
Spamming finishers the whole time.
Drew McIntyre coming out on top.
Yeah. I mean, look, everyone who listens to this show is very aware of my feelings towards Brock. And just, I think I've come to realize it's not even Brock anymore. It's just like Brock matches. And I know that, he's a hell of a seller, and ultimately he sells tickets, and beating him is a big deal. But most of the matches just end up kind of in this wheelhouse, right? It's like a few minutes long, spam the moves. And it's like you tweak the formula a little bit, but it's ultimately the same. And like I think we all knew Drew was going to win. Like they aired his freaking 24 last night after night one, right? Like they were grooming him to be the next guy, and he was far more capable of a better match than what they presented. And
to be fair, both of them are.
Yeah.
Like, a lot of people we talk shit about Brock and his matches, but I don't think that's on him. I think that's in large part due to creative not knowing what to do with him and just allowing him to be like Beast Brock and do the same moves because like they get over. But like if you put him in a 10 to 12 minute match, which he can easily do, he does decent work. Like he can sell, he could tell a story. And I think there was an opportunity to do that with Drew. And they just were like, all right, we got two meaty men slapping meat. Let's just have them do their finishers and like hit each other with the hardest things they can. It's like they really just missed an opportunity to put together a really solid match. It felt like they were like, oh shit, we have no idea what to do. There's no crowd. Like, I wonder if like Brock just didn't care. Like, which is
like, that's not out of his character necessarily, right? For him to just kind of mail it in. Like if he sees there's no crowd out there, like, is he incentivized to give his A game? I don't know. And maybe I'm a little bit too into, or I listen too much to that Jon Moxley interview where he talks about, his match with Brock, which ended up being a WrestleMania train wreck, a little bit, and just like Brock not being receptive if he wasn't fully bought in. And maybe if this, like we talked about with Cena and Bray, how that match benefited from no crowd. This match did not benefit from no crowd. Like it needed a crowd.
It needed a crowd in the worst way. It needed a crowd.
Yeah, because like Brock, when he takes someone to Suplex City or he hits F5s, the crowd just ramps up, right? Every time. Like he's very reliant on that. Drew also in his new babyface persona, him counting down into the Claymore kick, very, very reliant on the crowd. And it was just a bummer that like Drew, you and I called, like, we're almost entering our 1 year anniversary of the show, by the way, and thank you everyone for listening. But like, we've been saying this from the beginning that Drew was on like a world title trajectory, and it's just unfortunate that it kind of that it had to happen with no crowd, because I think if it did happen, like the reaction he got when he won the Rumble, that would have been 10 times.
Yeah, it would have been like tenfold larger.
Yeah.
Like, could you imagine the reaction to the crowd when he hit that first Claymore, like out of nowhere?
Bonkers.
Like the crowd would have
nuts.
popped like crazy. The crowd would have went bonkers when he kicked out at 1 on the first F5. Like that shit just would have like elevated that match, because then they're working with heat, and then they're like really reacting, and maybe Brock is doing a little bit more. Maybe they're changing things up. Like that's when they really benefit from a crowd. And this one just felt like, all right, we're going to go out. Like it felt like they literally talked in the back for 2 minutes. Like, all right, we're going to go out. I'm going to hit you with 3 F5s, and then you're going to hit me with 3 Claymores, and we're going to go home. Boom,
right.
That's it.
It felt like a wrestling video game where just the finishers are already stored in.
Right.
And you're just hitting L1 or left bumper. I don't want to leave out my PS4 or Xbox users, but that's what it really felt like. It was a bummer. But that being said, the right guy is now holding the WWE title.
Right. The booking decision was great. Like
sure.
Putting the belt on Drew was the right call. Man, I feel for him too, because he has that moment where he's holding the belt at the top of the ring, or when he's on the ring post and there's nothing. Like, could you imagine at WrestleMania, Raymond James, fireworks going off, crowd going nuts? He just missed out on that moment. It really sucks.
It really does. But okay, which is a great segue into the next question I have for you, and I think I know the answer because I already know mine. So night 1, this is the first WrestleMania with 2 nights. Night 1, night 2. Which night did you like better?
Night 1.
Yes.
Night 1 just stood out to me. There wasn't any moment where I felt like this was like it was dragging. This one felt like night 1. They're the same length in time, but night 1 felt like so much more crisp. This one felt like it was a slog in a lot of time, in a lot of areas. Obviously, I think Firefly Fun House is the greatest thing to happen this whole weekend.
Sure.
But overall, night 1 was just top to bottom. It was great.
I think night 1, I agree with you. I do like night 1 better. I think night 1 had the advantage of low expectations, right? After night 1, the bar just kind of inherently rose. And, I do think they could have divided the matches a little bit different. Like, I think Seth KO could have been tonight. You could have moved like Alistair Lashley to Saturday.
You could have done just like Raw and SmackDown. Like,
right.
You just had like
just kind
night
of
1 was all Raw.
Like divvying it up a little bit differently. Anyway, I agree with you. Night 1, night 2. My second question for you is, should they do this moving forward? Should WrestleMania just be a 2-night event moving forward?
Yes, and I have a bit of a tweak here.
Okay.
So 2 nights, but only 1 night live. The first night should be something like the Boneyard match in Firefly Funhouse, where they incorporate pre-taped matches, for one, to get more talent involved, but also to allow more creativity.
Sure.
That stuff that they did was so much better than what they did in the ring, to be honest with you. Like, there was a lot of good stuff in the ring, but like the Boneyard match and the Firefly Funhouse were so far ahead of everything else that I just want to see that more in the future. And I would love to see them do, like, they could still do NXT on Saturday night and then follow it up with like a 2-hour special of like WrestleMania preview or something like that. Like, they can come up with a better name, or like WrestleMania opening night, and have pre-taped matches with some craziness involved, and then you get into like the good shit the next day. I'm all for.
That's a great point.
I'm all for 2 nights.
I think with everything going on, all that had slipped my mind. Like, they had no Hall of Fame, no takeover, so that already cleared up an extra night. So I don't know, maybe move that shit 1 day earlier, move the Hall of Fame to Thursday, move takeover to Friday, and then a 2-night WrestleMania. Like, I'm in. Maybe I'm just saying that because I'm a prisoner of the moment, and I know we're going to WrestleMania 37 in LA next year.
Like, I don't know how you can justify doing 2 nights with a live crowd, because there's going to be a lot of people that are like, you don't know if you go to 1 night versus the other, you may be mad that you missed out on something.
Sure.
Or like there may be higher demand for 1 night versus the other. So that's why I was thinking, like, the first night could literally be something where there's no crowd. It's literally just pre-taped stuff, like where you have pre-taped matches, like a Boneyard match, a Firefly Fun House, Final Deletion, something along those lines, where you have people watching the network and interacting with your content outside of like live events, and then you have something else the next night. You can just make it a little bit more interesting. That's my take, but yeah. I mean, if they wanted to do it 2 nights live, I'd go to both nights live, but it would not be beneficial for my pocketbook. That's for sure.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, look, this is a snagger episode, so I don't want to take too long, because I'm sure we'll talk more about everything that's going on our regular show. Our next show, by the way, is our 1-year anniversary show. We're figuring out some big stuff for you guys. Thanks for hanging with us for an entire calendar year, which is
that's wild
to think about.
Like over 60 shows, something like that.
Yeah. We've been banging them out, and it's been a lot of fun. This WrestleMania experience ended up being. I remember last year we recorded our first ever episode after WrestleMania 35, and we had watched the entire card. It was literally 7 hours. And you and I had that moment toward the end of the card. We were like, "Are we really going to record?" We were both exhausted.
So tired.
We had so much beer at that point, but we ended up doing it, and we've been doing it ever since. And this has been an insane amount of fun. We're adding the video aspect now, as you can see, and we've got more fun changes on the way that we'll announce on the 1-year anniversary show. But in the meantime, please download, subscribe, and rate our podcasts on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, wherever you download your podcasts. But again, if you're one of our Apple Podcast users, hit us with that 5-star rating and leave a review.
And make sure you follow us on social. You can follow us at 2JabroniesPod on Instagram and on Twitter. You can follow me personally at Jeremy A. Loss. You can follow Ben at Cruise Control. That's Control with a K. And thank you to everybody who's been listening to us for a year. It's been a huge pleasure doing this and a whole bunch of fun. So yeah, make sure you follow us on social, interact with us, and let's keep this thing moving for the next year.
Absolutely. All right, everyone. Hope everyone had a great WrestleMania weekend. Don't be a jabroni. Stay home, wash your hands, and we will talk to you soon. Peace.
Stay safe, everybody.